All right. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Blue Shifting and welcome to the SeaBed wrap. It's been quite a ride. I'd like to say because I'm so bad every time I will play these series, any series really. Oh, and I'm streaming a terrible, not even a slideshow. Let's get to the slideshow. I'm so bad at being able to. I'm so bad at just predicting these types of things, because I remember when I first got SeaBed and it first dropped in for me, I remember the first thing I said was like, oh, this looks like it's gonna be pretty short. And I think at the end of I hit the end of chapter 2 and I was like, I wonder if it's gonna be ending soon. Oh boy, was I wrong. But anyway, so thank you guys for joining me here, and thank you so much for our guest today. By the way, what should we call you tonight?
Hi, you can call me Jake if you want. That's cool by me. Good to be.
Oh, yeah, I think I lost you for a little bit. What'd you say?
Yeah, good to be here. And yeah, you can call me Jake. That's fine.
Okay, just making sure I'm hearing that right. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me tonight. You've been participating very heavily in the chat with the leaving comments during pretty much all the episodes from the get-go. And so you've always had some really interesting things to say. So I'm really interested to see what you think when it comes to some of the more finer points of the series. And if you're joining us, I'd like to also highlight real quick, SeaBed is a fantastic visual novel translated from Fruitback Factory. It's a story about 3 women and their journey through love, life, and sadness and heartbreak. It's a really good one. I honestly think you should read it. So if you have tuned into this and you have not read it, I would honestly advise that you decide to put that down and to go ahead and read it first. But I also know that there's so many visual novels out there, and that not everyone on the channel watches everything that we do. So if you're comfortable watching something and learning a little bit about, the story without having it a bit spoiled, then go ahead and stick around. Just do so at your own risk. If you do decide to do that, you are going to miss out a little bit on a wonderful series about, well, the best thing about the series, honestly, I think, is how surreal it is. The story is told in such a surreal manner, but the feelings and the emotions that the people are experiencing of all the characters that they're each kind of going through on their journey is so real and so impactful that if you were to get to the end of my series, you'll find that, we all know, if you come to the Blue Shifting, you're expecting someone who's going to get emotional and cry at the drop of a hat. But in this one, I was crying at the most unusual times, because it would be the most random things would be happening. There'd be no real big emotional orchestrations or any particular scenes, and then suddenly I'm bawling my eyes out. And I don't know why. So we'll talk a little bit about that with Jake here. And I'm trying to keep an eye on chat. However, to have the slideshow up, I keep forgetting I lose track of some of my other screens. So it may take a bit for me to recognize that you're trying to communicate with me. So bear with me on that. If you ever want to participate in a future live stream, just contact me on the Discord channel. Links in the description below. All right, enough rambling. Let's get right to the meat of it. So when did you first come across SeaBed, for yourself?
It was, I think, in the fall of 2017. We are always on the lookout for interesting games. Oh, I guess I should mention that I'm actually from Fruitback Factory, so we worked on the game. Otherwise, this is gonna sound pretty. So we got a tip off about this game. I hadn't seen it before, and we looked into it, and it looked really interesting. So we basically licensed it right away and started working on it, and we actually got it out quite fast, I think in less than half a year.
Wow. So do you contact with the developers and the writers when you decide to bring a project on like this? What did they think about the idea of having it be kind of brought over and kind of handled by your company to the western side of everything?
Well, I think the thing that we mostly sell ourselves to the original developers for is the quality that we put into each project. So I was really happy that we were able to do all kinds of cool things for SeaBed, like increasing the resolution to high definition and making the background music sloop.
Oh yeah, no, everything worked really well. Like on the technical side, the only complaint I had, I think you probably saw, is like at the last episode when the credits rolled, for some reason the background pictures was strobing for me. And I don't know, that might have just been a graphical error on my computer. It could have been an issue with the game files. I didn't ever see anyone else talking about it, so I'm guessing it was just kind of a fluke for me. I learned like a few days later I hadn't updated my drivers for my graphics card. They had been ready and available, but I just hadn't gotten around to updating them yet, and so that easily could have been part of it.
Yeah, I hadn't seen a problem before. I think it might be something related to full screen.
Yeah, that's also very possible. But otherwise, the game was technically was very sound, but also just emotionally is very good. So, I guess real quick, I want to talk about like the feelings I had for the very beginning of the game when like we're first getting introduced to the characters and everything. Because I gotta admit, like, it's hard to understand where the game's coming from initially, because it just seems to be like a love story, and then it shows kind of a bit of a tragedy, because you go from the first like sequence of events, which is the main characters Sachiko and Takako on their trip to the Southern Islands, where they kind of get to have some kind of like fun and romantic getaways, because they're kind of the main heroines, I would say, of the story. Best friends who grew up, ended up falling in love with each other. Who knows when either? I don't think they even know. They kind of just like they always were meant to be together. And you get to see kind of this culmination of just how like genuine their feelings were, which was one thing I really liked. I liked how it didn't just shove like a whole bunch of romance in your face. It was more about seeing how they complemented each other and how they talked to each other and how they were so strongly connected as friends, and then introduced the idea that, oh, there is a level of intimacy involved here as well, which, based on my experience with dating and eventually getting married, that was the same for me. It's like, you don't have these Hollywood type romances. It's like, that's not really realistic to life. What you find are just these people who are just compliments to you, and you just happen to have that closeness with them. But it's not like, I don't know, especially as I've like been together with someone for so long, it's like we don't go walking around and like you wouldn't find us like being super like intimate in public, just because we don't need to be. And that's kind of nice, because it's like, I remember when I was growing up, it felt like all the high school kids that were in relationships always had to display it somehow. It's like, so how for you, like, as you were working with the game and playing through the game yourself, I mean, like, what did you think of at least the Takako and Sachiko relationship early on?
Yeah, I guess I should start by saying that the writing style itself of the game is very interesting. It's quite unique, really. And like I said, it's mostly very mundane stuff. Like, you really need to have an appreciation of slice of life kind of writing for this game, because if you're just waiting for something to happen, it's never going to happen in this game.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I think pretty much all the characters are awesome, but of course, Sachiko and Takako, they have such a dynamic relationship, and like all their dialogue together is fun. They're just like very well-rounded and established characters.
I agree. So I guess I gotta ask now. It's cruel to have to try and pick, but if you had to pick of the three main characters, Sachiko, Takako, and Narasaki, who becomes very, very much involved, especially towards the end, but in the beginning, she and Sachiko really have some bonding that's happening. Like, if you had to pick one, who's your favorite of the three?
Yeah, that's a very tough question.
It's a super tough question.
I think Narasaki does edge it out, partially because she doesn't really get the appreciation that she deserves in the game itself. So I feel like I have to give it to her.
Oh no, you cut out right before you gave your answer.
Oh, really?
You said, I have to give it to, and then it went black for a second. So what did you say?
Yeah. I feel that Narasaki doesn't really get the appreciation that she deserves in the game itself, so I feel I need to give it to her, because as the reader of the game, you're kind of the only person who is privy to everything she does in the game.
Oh yeah, no, you've got absolutely right, because it's like, I think I have to agree. Like, I think Narasaki, she kind of, oh man. Okay, so all three characters are very important to the story, but Narasaki is, I think, the hero of the story, because it's really through her efforts, and it's so crazy considering like her origin and like what slash who she is, um, and it's amazing that she really effectively pulls off like the success of the story, the resolution is really, she's the catalyst for it, and she very nearly dies for it willingly, which is like, it was a beautiful, like, it was really sad but beautiful, and I'm really happy that there was like a more solid resolution for her as well. But I legitimately thought that she was actually going to sacrifice herself for the cause of love, and I was just like, oh, Narasaki, I love you. Oh wait, Alyssa finally got back to the chat. Wild romance, I know, every single time you bring it up, I don't know, like the more you bring it up, the less I want to look it up, but I will consider it. And but yes, and you also mentioned Kissy Kissy. Yes, this is a visual novel. It's a Yuri novel, in case you haven't noticed from the pictures. This is definitely about like the romantic relationships between girls, but like that's really the fun thing too, is like I liked how when you have sometimes a Yuri novel, you end up getting, sometimes you can see that there's kind of an agenda behind it. This doesn't happen as much in visual novels as it does in more mainstream games, which is something I've always been annoyed by. But SeaBed does it perfectly, where it's like the highlight is more about the relationship and the emotional connections. It almost doesn't matter who's in the relationship, really. It just happens to be Takako and Sachiko. And of course it has impact based on who they are and their background, but like I just liked how the narrative was more about the love that they shared, and not the fact that they were in love, which is something that often comes up in other types of titles.
Yeah, about that I can mention one interesting detail about the writing itself, which may not be obvious if you don't stop to think about it. Like this whole game has been purposely written in a way that it avoids talking about emotions. Like there is no vocabulary about what the characters are feeling. You need to actually infer it yourself from what's happening and what they're doing.
That's a good point. There's like a little bit where like they're I like immediately what popped in mind was where Takako had been listening to the ghost stories by Sane, and she was walking the hallway, and it started like she thought she saw something, and the way the music kind of kicked in and then like disappeared. It was really good about capturing the emotions of that time, but it didn't do I don't want to call it lazy writing, but it is kind of lazy writing when it says like something like Takako was afraid. Like, yeah, it doesn't ever say blatantly what they're going through, but you can craft the atmosphere so well based on like what's happening that you don't need it to say that, which is really the sign of good writing. There's so much evidence of like fantastic writing skills, whether it be inspired directly from the source or just on the behalf of the translators. They really nailed it. And so you're right, like they don't expressly like have to point out what people are feeling. But it's implied so effectively, you don't need it to. And maybe that's why it's so effective, because it brings a depth of character. You get this immersion into the character, because you understand that they're not just feeling anger or sadness or confusion or regret. It's kind of like they're feeling all of them at the same time, and you get to feel that part of the journey. And so that's probably why the story is so impactful, and also why you can have these strong emotional reactions in these odd places. Because like unanimously, when I mentioned how odd it was, where like there wouldn't be anything directly happening that was sad, but I would just get this feeling, and it would like hit me that of all the things that had been happening and what they implied and like what was going on and what was truly happening in the moment, and it would just kind of hit and crash on me, and I'd find myself just getting super emotional. And almost everybody else had a similar conclusion. They're all like, exactly, I don't know what it is with this game, but there's just these moments where I found myself crying and I didn't know why. and it's so cool that you can pull that off, especially because I keep like sometimes it's easy to forget, but this has been translated, and like visual novels pretty much exclusively, except for like the few Western companies that are starting to pop up. They've been translated from one language to another. To be able to evoke such powerful emotions with SeaBed, Steins Gate, Muv-Luv, to evoke that so perfectly in a translation is a lot harder than a lot of people probably think it is. I don't even have experience with translation, but I do know, I mean, heck, use Google Translate once, and that's enough of an example to show how just getting words meaning from one side to another does not equate sense, let alone emotional depth.
Yeah, definitely. I have it from the translators that, or translator, that this was one of the more challenging projects that he ever worked on, but I'm really happy with the outcome. I think it really captures the original tone.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And if possible, like, you should tell the translator, and heck, if you could ever get a message out to the people who originally wrote and produced this story, like, if you can, tell them thank you. Tell them that oddly, this was one of the more moving stories and visual novels I've actually encountered up till this date. And like, we're talking about including Steins Gate and Muv-Luv, fantastic games, and still they're really going to be hard to top in general, just because they're so broadly just amazing. But to have SeaBed as a project, like, they should know that it's up there in my mind with one of the better games I've ever played. So if you get a chance to, just let them know that at the very least, because I don't know how many of them would actually watch my content, but
yeah, I'll happily do that.
Oh, thank you. So I didn't actually answer the question myself. I mentioned like who your favorite character is, and Narasaki. Honestly, I do kind of agree with you. Narasaki's really awesome, but I have to throw my vote in for Takako for two reasons. Number one, I think she would have been the best person of the three for me to have in my life, especially when I was younger. I've never been quiet. I've always had a loud, boisterous voice, but I've always been quiet in the sense of being more reserved. I've never liked getting my toe out of line. I've never liked putting myself in awkward situations, and especially when I was younger, I was very content to just sit on my own, read a book. And so I could empathize with Sachiko a lot, because we had similar mannerisms, especially when I was on the younger end of my life. Well, it's not like it was that long ago, but you know what I mean. And so it took people like Takako to help me understand what was so important about being able to be open and to experience new things, and to not always just be caught up in, worrying about what other people think. And it's because of those people that I think I was able to overcome some of that hesitation and learned how to take life into my own hands, and specifically to challenge myself. Doing something like YouTube, it's kind of scary, and it's rough, and it's rough, especially now. Like, I went and watched one of my older videos this morning, and it hurts. It hurts to look that awkward to myself and to see the mistakes I was making, but to be willing to put myself out there and to take these challenges is something I learned from my own Takako. And so I really liked her because she was the kind of person who I was like, if I were to be friends with anybody, I'd want to be friends with Takako. She was also my favorite to voice. I'm sure she was the most obnoxious to listen to, but I had fun doing the voice.
No, it's great. I really love your voicing of Takako. And yeah, I can totally understand that. I probably personally see myself most in Sachiko as well, and I would love to have like a Takako around from this game.
Yeah, she really was a wonderful person. It could be hard to keep up with her, I'm sure, but like she was just somebody who, and that's what, like I said, it's funny because we're talking about her like she's a real person, but she's just so well written that she really felt like a real person, and felt like she's like that best friend you never had, but always thought you'd have. So I actually want to talk a little bit about the nature of memory real quick, because I don't know how many of you have experienced or had a chance to learn much about psychology or neurology, but I actually was able to because I originally was going to be a psych major before I switched to physics, and in those classes it was really interesting. I've talked a lot about it in the show, but I still wanted to bring it up because the way that the game plays with the nature of memory is more accurate than you would think, because like the way your memories work, you don't actually remember them like a movie inside your head. Your memories are dissected and broken up into pieces in almost like a filing system. So if somebody holds up a toy rocket ship that's blue, and you see them holding it up, and then you leave. When you store that memory in your head, you're not remembering a blue rocket ship being held up in the air. Instead, the memory gets broken down into something that's blue. So like this memory is tied to something blue, the shape of the rocket, and the person who was holding it, and what position you saw it in. And so those are broken into those different types of segments that are filed in different places in your brain. And then if you try to recall, oh, what was the toy that person was holding up? Then your brain's hippocampus goes back and retrieves the impressions that were left there. So then it takes the color blue, the shape of the rocket, the position in the air, and the person who was holding it, and kind of smooshes them back together and throws it into your frontal cortex, where you take those components and you compile them into your memory. And it's really efficient, and it's one of the reasons why we can remember so much, but it also has a backdrop about how memories decay over time. You can disrupt the memory process, and when you're thinking about a memory, you can actually have it be changed unintentionally, or intentionally, I suppose, if you use hypnosis. You can alter these memories and change them and kind of put them back. And so it's interesting that there's a whole theme throughout the whole series about memory, because we see the two extremes where we have Sachiko, whose memories are bursting through into reality and disrupting her normal life because she's seeing and hearing things that aren't real and are like workings of her mind. They're either just reflections of the past or conglomerations of something new. And then you have the degenerative disease that Takako had in the sanatorium, where she would have these lapses of memory where she would suddenly just forget huge chunks of her life. And so it's interesting to imagine, because those are two extremes that are like terrifying to me as a person. Like, I personally think that the idea of eventually losing my mind is one of the most terrifying concepts in the entire world. I can't think of anything worse than having to lose my mind slowly over time.
Yeah, memories and perception are definitely very big themes in the game, and it's interesting because it plays both in the game and in the writing itself. Like, the game tells you a lot about how our perception, our memory works, but at the same time it puts all of that into practice in the way that it actually delivers the story to you, because there are like instances where there is something wrong in a scene, and it's told to the reader straight up, but because the characters don't react to it, then as the reader you just gloss over it, because we are so reliant on the cues of the characters, and we don't even notice if there was something that totally contradicts what was said like 5 lines ago.
Oh yeah, I miss so many of those. Like, upon reflection, I'm sure there's so many more. Hey, you loved to tease me in the comments about that. You'd be like, "Oh, you shouldn't be paying attention." Like the darn
I hope
Clover.
I wasn't too bad about that.
That darn Clover, if I remember correctly, that's like a theme that you see throughout the whole thing. Like, I can't believe it took me so long to realize it. But there's a scene, because as we know, like Takako's, like where Takako is in the whole story, pretty much, is kind of it's an odd location. I don't want to go too detailed because I really don't want to spoil it, but like I want to talk about this content, so we're gonna end up spoiling stuff. There's a time where she goes to a museum and it's full of like these odd art projects, and like you said, they kind of glance over it. It just seems so natural. but specifically described a few pieces, specifically a clover, and almost immediately it shows us a flashback of Takako painting that painting in Sachiko's memory, like when they were kids. And like, I remember thinking that's weird, but it kind of just was like, let's move on. But like, in hindsight, when I got to the end, I realized, oh my gosh, that museum. The museum was like a museum of Takako's like gifts to Sachiko. That's like what that whole museum was supposed to be representing. It was supposed to be representing these cherished memories of Sachiko for her friend and like the gifts that were involved in these types of exchanges. And it's like, how did I not like? It seems so blatant now, but at the time I completely missed it.
Right. Yeah, there's such a huge number of those kinds of little details. I think when I was watching your Let's Play of this game, I think it's like my 4th playthrough of the game, and I was still like almost every episode going, oh, this is that little thing that they're referring to in another play.
This might be the first Let's Play I've made that I actually need to go back and watch, like, from beginning to end. Because most of the time, like, I end up watching my videos at least twice, because I have to edit them, too. Which is funny, because, like, a lot of people, I think, don't understand that there is a lot of editing that needs to happen in a visual novel. Much less than you would have in other kind of games, like Skyrim or whatever, where there's a lot of boring sections where you need to cut it down. Visual novels don't have too much cutting because the content is all pretty relevant. But there is a lot of editing that goes into keeping flow, especially if I have an interruption of some kind or make some kind of gross noise in the microphone that I really don't want to be in there. But so I end up watching the videos over again, but with this series, like, I really need to go and just watch it from the beginning, because like now that I understand what's happening, which for me, I didn't really know until we were probably in the final like 4th of the game. It's finally when I finally was making those big connections and being like, oh my gosh, so this is so and so, and this is so and so, and this is where they are and what they're doing. So I do want to go back and I want to see like all the things that I missed and kind of catch those references. I could try and just play the game again too, but it's a long one. I wish I had more free time, but I tend to use most of my free time for the channel stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way, there's like 2 layers to the game. There's the story that you read, and then there's everything that happens like underneath the story. And there's this one phrase that I keep saying about SeaBed: you can always go deeper. Like there's always a new layer of different teams connecting and different details connecting. And like there's this whole another aspect to the game that it's also a mystery. And I've tried not to comment too much on like those kinds of details, like what does this actually mean and so on, because I know things just from working on the game, and I know that there are still secrets that not a single English player has realized.
Are you serious? Oh my gosh, that must be horrible to have to hold that in and not be able to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I would try to tease you to share one now, but I honestly, like, I highly respect you for being able to hold back, because for me, I hate spoilers. Like, it's one of the biggest problems I think that can happen when you are reading something, and so I'm happy that there are other people who are absolutely like supportive of that. Actually, it's funny too, because like a book series I really love, which, like, I don't know, I talk about it all the time, and I always will, because I love this author's works, Brandon Sanderson. If you haven't had a chance to read his stuff, read it. It's really good. I'm a huge fan. And it's been translated into all these other languages too. So like, if you exist and there are books where you exist, you will probably find his books. Did you say you read him too?
One of my favorite authors at the moment.
Oh yeah, he's so good, and one of my favorite characters. Well, I don't know if he's one of my favorite characters, but he's one of the more impactful characters from his series Mistborn. Has a catchphrase, which is very, very much applies to what we were just talking about, which is there's always another secret. And so like every time I think about this game, I think about like just how like there's layers upon layers of meaning, intrigue, and conversation and impact, like over and over and over. Like, it's always like that. It's that concept that there's always more. There's another secret. There's something you've never noticed before that you should really like pay attention to. And that's a sign of a sign of good writing, I think. Is that there's so much. I think it's the curse of a good writer is that there are meanings, impressions, and events that are going on in their story that no one ever notices, even though it feels like they should. But there's always stuff people miss, and like that's got to be the hardest thing, to be like, I'm not just gonna tell them, like it's part of the journey, you gotta figure it out. But it's like, sometimes I'm sure it's got to be hard, because especially if you know what you're doing and you're a good writer, like it must be hard to not want to feel like clever, be like, oh come on guys, just figure it out, I want to talk about it.
Yeah, and the mystery part was kind of a challenge in the translation of this game as well, because as you know, mystery can be very reliant on all the details being accurate. And since it's a translation, that's always a challenge. So there was a lot of stuff that after the translation was finished, we got in contact with the writer and checked very carefully, like, what does this mean? Is this intended? And so on. So that we could change all the relevant parts to be exactly accurate with the hidden meaning behind them and so on.
Yeah, that's got to be so hard, because I think one of the most powerful methods of, especially in mystery, like is its atmosphere and kind of like, I guess, parallelisms. Like I think parallelisms are some of the most important things in any story, but in mystery especially, where you want to, I guess the real term is called priming. You use it in a ton of things, not just writing, but the idea is that, like, for the twist, the eventual twist of the mystery to really have impact, or multiple twists, there's usually multiple, but in order for them to really hit and stick, you kind of need your readers to be prepared for the reality. Like, you want them to not really know the answer, but you want them to kind of have an idea of where it could be. Because if you literally just drop like a twist of like, oh boom, that was this person the whole time, if they're not really invested in the situation, and they don't feel like that they kind of thought they understood what's going on, then there's not going to be that big of an impact. But like, man, like when the hammer came for this game, like when I figured out who Narasaki was, like it rocked my world. And that's because if you go back into episodes, I had these weird feelings from the beginning. I was just like, there's something weird about Dr. Narasaki. There's something really odd about who she is and what she keeps talking about. And like,
right.
I think, and so the priming comes from this writing ability to be able to subtly indicate early on that there was something different about Narasaki, and to constantly kind of be pointing it out, and to see little tiny inconsistencies that like could be coincidence but could not be. I remember like right around the time when the snow was starting to fall, and we had the whole kind of altercation between Sachiko and Nanae, when like kind of like the more controversial of the episodes. But around that time, we had some instances with Narasaki and with Sachiko, and I noticed, it was the first time I noticed, it's like, I don't ever see them like really together with anybody else. But I didn't know what that would end up, if that would mean anything. But I was primed, so that when the twist did come, I was like, holy crap, that's right, it makes sense. And that's what you really need to deliver. Doing that in a translation, it's gotta be hard. Or like using cultural references in any regard, it's gotta be a super huge challenge. Because like, what do? Do you just stick with like the Japanese version and hope that the international audience can understand / kind of comprehend it? Or do you try and adjust it to fit a cultural reference based on like the Western nations? And if you do, which reference do you make? It's gotta be a nightmare to try and keep the nuances in a mystery.
Yeah, I would definitely say that Narasaki and the journey to realizing what she's all about is something that's very interesting to follow whenever somebody's playing the game. And there are like hints about it throughout the game. I think like around maybe chapter 2 is like the most realistic times that you might start to realize it. But like you said, you usually just get a weird feeling like there's something weird about happening in these scenes. And it's what I said earlier, like you are giving these hints in the story, but you will gloss over them, but your brain still realizes that there's something wrong or something weird. You can actually already figure it out in the prologue if you really read carefully.
Oh man, now I gotta go back at least to the prologue and be like, all right, what's happening? Because I want to see. I need to see what you're talking about.
Right.
All right, so let's dive a little bit more into like some of the things we see in the story, because we do see at the end of the story the implication that Sachiko has kind of been able to kind of move forward in her life. And you specifically can see this because of the of an interaction she has with Nanae. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that they would like? Do you feel like, because this is all post of like obviously we don't know for sure what the writers think would happen, but do you see them actually hitting it off and becoming an actual, like having her move on with an actual new relationship with Nanae? Or was that more of just a representation of the fact that she's moving on and that the two of them wouldn't actually work out well together?
Well, I think that after basically the end of the story, their relationship will progress, and there's a hint about that in the way that on Takako's side you see that ship, because, well, this is actually pretty difficult to explain without any major spoilers, but basically there is you see the ship on that side, so that comes from something, so something else happened on the other side.
That's true. It is really hard. We really can't spoil it, but I'm just like trying to be delicate about how we spoil things. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the ending of Titanic, the movie, where like we know that Rose and Jack, like, they met, they had a crazy wild love story, obviously less realistic that you'd fall in love with someone after only 2 days, because that's ridiculous. But Hollywood, we'll let them have it. So you have Rose and Jack. They have this meaningful relationship, this meaningful connection. They have this disaster that they try to survive. Rose survives, Jack does not. Spoiler if you haven't seen Titanic, but guess what? The ship sinks. Anyway.
What?
So, but then we know from the beginning of the movie that she lived a long, fulfilling life. She established herself in the United States. She changed her name. She got married, had kids, had grandkids, and then finally came to share her story with the people who were like exploring the Titanic wreck when she was like 88 or something. But she talked about the feelings and the impact that Jack had in her life. And then at the end of the movie, you see the whole sequence where she kind of like it as a spirit, effectively, she returns to this version of the Titanic that's still around, and you see all the people who had passed away but who were still connected and to the ship and were still on it, including Jack. And she kind of returns to Jack in that sense, where it's like, I always thought that was an interesting choice for the story, because it was like, wouldn't you think, like, yes, it was a very impactful time, but wouldn't you think she would still have a stronger bond with the person she ended up actually marrying and having children with? Once again, it's for the sake of a story, but
that's not something I've ever thought about, but now that you mentioned it, yeah.
I think it's interesting because it's like, in this story, it's like you kind of get that impression of a very similar situation happening, where like you wonder if like it's implied whether or not would Sachiko actually have moved forward with her life and moved beyond.
I lost you.
Huh? Sorry, you cut out for a little bit. I think I missed something you were saying. Oh no! I think we're losing you. Yeah, I can't hear you if you're talking, so I'll keep...
I lost your audio.
Oh, okay. You're back now. I think can you hear me?
I'm not hearing you in the chat anymore.
Oh no, I'm here. I hear you. Let me see if I can figure this out. Oh, Discord. All right. Let's see. I hear you. Hopefully we'll get him back soon. Actually, I can move this. Looks like I can still keep the screen up. Yeah. Okay, this will work. Okay. I can see clearly now that the files are moved. So So keep working on that. Try, if you can hear me, try and... Okay. Okay, he's gonna try and rejoin real quick. Hopefully he'll be just fine with that. But like I was saying, so what we see in the ending, it kind of implies whether or not this idea that will Sachiko actually move forward with everything? Will she actually find that change? And will she bond more with somebody else? Or is she still going to harbor in her heart like her true love of Takako? And if like maybe in a belief of an afterlife or an after existence, maybe we can see them. It looks like I lost him for a second, so I'll try restarting. Oh, I hear you now. You hear me?
It's all good again.
Hello?
All good.
Yay! Awesome. Okay, we're all good. So, like, I guess in summary, that like idea is just like I wonder, like, if Sachiko is going to have she's going to obviously have a life, but is she going to move on to the point where she might be more bonded with somebody else, or is she always going to harbor that special place in her heart for Takako? I don't know. My money's on Takako. I mean, they had a crazy strong bond, but at the same time, there's also that narrative of like, I want to feel like if disaster strikes you or me, that we're going to be able to move on from our trials, from our sorrows.
I definitely think that Takako will always have a very special place in her heart like that. I don't think that's ever going to change. But I also don't think that she needs to be like replaced with a new Takako. I think that eventually Sachiko can have something new and still have a Takako in her.
Yeah, that's true. I like that the mentality, which we see in other stories too, but I really think it's true in life that, because it's not really a spoiler, that we learn, at least, well, there's obviously weirdness going on, but it's pretty early on in the story you find out that Takako passed away. But it's not as simple as that, so if you hear that, trust me, it's actually not the spoiler you think it is. But the concept that we don't have to have an afterlife per se, because it can always be a touchy subject, but I think it's valid to talk about it in certain respects for sure. And this is one of them where it's like, regardless of whether or not there is like an actual afterlife, like if the soul is real and we actually continue to exist after death, we exist as long as we exist in the minds of others. Like, I don't care what your philosophy is. When my great-grandmother passed away, I cherish her memories in my heart because she was a very important part of my childhood. And as long as I have those memories, as long as I have those ideas and have her in my mind, somewhere, somehow, she still technically lives. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think that's kind of like the story of SeaBed. It's like the question of like, how alive can people be in memory versus like real life? Which you'd think would be an easy answer, but not for SeaBed.
Yeah, definitely not. I think it has a very subtle answer to a question. And it also brings up the point that even if you're alive, you may not really exist. You may not really be cognizant of anything you're doing and so on. Like, you may kind of be more dead while you're alive than when you're dead.
That's actually very true. Yeah, early Sachiko, like, going through the motions hard. Her life had become so empty. And it's so funny because like we don't really see her life. We don't get a ton of contrast between her life like before and after. We mostly see after, but at the same time you can kind of see how over time she starts to learn to live again. And it's really cool to see that journey. One thing I did think was interesting when it comes to the nature of memory, for instance, sometimes you see Sachiko's memories of her and Takako. But then I was shocked when we got the first memory from Takako's side. Like when we see things from her perspective. Because Sachiko in Takako's memory seems like a little different. And I don't think that's unintentional. because when we're in Sachiko's mind, she comes across as very timid, reluctant to act, and kind of getting dragged about by Takako. She's happy to be a Takako, but she kind of feels like she has almost this little bit, not resentment towards Takako, but resentment towards, like, kind of being pushed out of her bubble. And, like, the situation she gets in, she's always talking about, like, she's like, oh, I lost her again. She went running off. Like, where is she? Like, kind of attitude. But then we go to Takako's memory, and in Takako's version of it, she always seems to view Sachiko as, like, her landline, her sense of Takako's always getting confused and wondering, like, what should we do? Where should we go? What are we supposed to do now? And Sachiko's like, oh, no, here we go. Kind of like giving her nudges in the right directions and being a little bit more confident, which is interesting because, like, it's so interesting to see those different sides of Sachiko, and I always thought that was a fun way to show, like, the differences between the two.
Yeah, I think those are very good points, and there's definitely this contrast you can see between what Sachiko thinks of herself and how she even remembers herself compared to, like, how Takako sees her. And it's even brought up in the sections with Sachiko and Narasaki, when Sachiko is always kind of like self-deprecating about herself, while Narasaki is pointing out, no, you're actually pretty great at everything.
Oh yeah, and that's so true to form. If there's anything that's true, it's that. It's like we tend to be our own worst critics, but we also tend to remember, like, ourselves differently than we probably are, and that once again, it kind of ties back to, like, that lucid, the lucid fluid dynamic that memory is. You can take a critical memory that you remember super well with other people, and you could have them ask them to like, without you putting input in, like, ask them to remember that scene, and I bet you'll be surprised at how different their memory is of the same exact event. Like, the only exception would be major events like 9/11. I think something that's, like, so global and universal. It's like the memories of what happened was so overstimulated. Like, we really can't be too confused, but we all have our own unique. I don't want to say adventures because that's the wrong word, but we have our own unique perspective on what happened with that. But on most smaller memories, we can have completely different recollections of the exact same events.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't want to go too much longer. We're getting kind of close to our hour time that I wanted to kind of shoot for. I guess one thing I wanted to talk about. There's two more topics I kind of want to bring up, and the first one I think is the confrontation of experiencing a personal loss in life. It's interesting because, like, this story is something I'd highly recommend to people who, especially if you've had to experience a loss in your life of a loved one or a close friend. But it's also at the same time, like, it will be an emotional trip. If especially those feelings are really raw. But I think, and then even if you haven't experienced it, I think, because books and novels and visual novels are twofold. Either it can be a vent for you to express in a subtle way your own feelings if you can empathize with a character and be like, wow, I know what that feels like and this feels the same. It can be a way for you to kind of vent and express that feeling that you might not be able to feel like you can talk about with other people. And then on the other hand, if you've never really lost anyone close to you, like, besides my great-grandma, I haven't actually experienced much death in my life. Like, I've got my grandparents, I've got my siblings, I've got my friends. I haven't had anyone be taken from me in such a shocking way as we see in the story. And so it gives me a perspective into the mind of somebody who has gone through a great loss. As a matter of fact, I'm curious as whether or not the writer or writers had somebody on their team who did go through such a major loss, who were able to put so much emotion and raw, like, power into the story. Because I don't think I could write a story. I'm not a great writer, but I do write. And I don't think I could write a story as impactful about the feelings of loss and trying to move forward in life as SeaBed does.
Yeah, I don't actually have any insider knowledge about that. It's not the kind of topic that I'd feel comfortable asking the writer about. But yeah, it's a very good question, and it feels like they must have
something, or at the very least, they have a grasp of the way people deal with grief that most people, I don't think, know. Which is entirely possible if you just empathize properly, and if you have been able to be there for somebody who has gone through loss. Because based on what I've experienced with like this story and with other people, is I feel like loss isn't some big like Titanic event. It tends to be a slow burn, where there's a dramatic change, and at first it's a shock, but then it's just reality, and it's like you just have to kind of like the worst part, I think, especially because like well, I haven't gone through grief, my wife has. Her father passed away last year very suddenly and unexpectedly, and she had to be in charge of all the funeral stuff and all of his accounts, and she was given 3 days to grieve. Like I'm happy that her work was willing to give her 3 days, but like in the eyes of the world and outside of her life and her family, after 3 days she was expected to just kind of be right back at it, you know, going to work, doing her job, like providing, getting like paying bills, doing groceries, washing dishes, you know, the normal stuff. But I could see like her world felt like it had been turned upside down. But it was like nobody else is like, so she feels like she's walking on a ceiling, but everyone else doesn't seem to notice that they're walking on the ceiling too.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in some funerals myself, and I don't personally feel like the event itself is even a major part of the whole process of dealing with it all. Like the real thoughts and feelings come somewhere to.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic to bring up, and I think we should all strive to be more, maybe more present about these types of situations, to be more aware of how hard it can be. And so that's another reason, like if for some reason you haven't read this, even though we probably have spoiled some things for you, like it's a very worthy visual novel to read. It's very much a story that I think can bring up ideas that may not be, I don't know, that may be foreign to you, that maybe you haven't had to experience yet, but we all will eventually. I mean, it's pretty much inevitable. So it's something I feel is good to be cognizant of. And the story does a good job of not smacking you in the head and clubbing you with these feelings. Like, it really does a good job of making it real. I will say it's long. Like, sometimes you can see the backgrounds and you see like how a lot of the frames are square. Like it's not like, and like you can see like there's some that are so beautifully done, and others that feel like they're pictures that are kind of granulated. Turns out there's a reason for that too. It took me forever to realize that the backgrounds were almost telling as much of an important story as everything else, because there were different styles for different types of scenes, and when you watch it and pay attention, it makes a lot of sense. But like, yeah, no, absolutely, this is worth it. I don't remember how much it is in the Steam store right now. I doubt it's very much so. I don't remember it being very high initially when I got it. And
I believe it's $20 normal price.
Okay. So it's like it's not like a cheap visual novel, but you definitely get your bang for your buck. And like I put several hours into this, because like I put in so many. There's a lot of episodes, and a lot of them are at an hour length too. So like you'll definitely be in for an experience. And boy, if you ever have this like the desire to travel, oh my gosh, this story will make you want to travel so bad. I think that's like what were you gonna say?
Definitely, I've done a bit of it myself.
You're so lucky. So how much have you been able to travel? Like, I mean, obviously work is probably a part of it, but like where are some of the places you've been able to visit?
Well, I did my Rome SeaBed pilgrimage like last winter. haven't been to San Francisco yet.
Me either. It's in my own country. Haven't been there. Heck, I live in New York State now. I've lived here for over a year. I still haven't been to New York City.
Right. I usually do a bit of traveling in Europe, but mostly I just go to Japan.
Oh man, I want to go to Japan so bad. I want to travel. I've always wanted to travel. I was actually going to in college. I signed up. I was gonna do like a cool exchange in Europe. I was gonna be able to visit. I think we were gonna start in Italy, and then we're gonna spend some time in Italy, France, Germany, England, Ireland, Spain, and I think we were going to try and go to Ukraine, but I'm not sure if that was actually going to end up being a thing, because Ukraine's can be a little harder to schedule in and everything, especially because they had a responsibility working with the school to keep everyone together and make sure nothing would happen, and so they had to be very careful about how they planned everything. But I was going to go on this awesome trip, finally get to see the world a little bit. And then I had an accident at work, tore my ACL and my knee. I had surgery the day my class flew out to Europe, and I was still on crutches when they came back.
That's terrible.
It is. And then I got married, and we had I got married, and I had kids shortly afterwards. I was just yep, I'm grounded, not traveling for a little bit, and I'm gonna do what I can, and I do what I can, but as far as going to my dream location now, Japan or London or anywhere, I think I'm gonna have to wait a bit. But the nice thing is that my wife and I, we've worked really hard. We've been able to be smart with our money and get rid of pretty much all of our debt. And so give us a few more years, and I think world travel is going to become a thing because we're working our butts off now. So cross our fingers. If I get to go to Japan, oh gosh. The hard thing actually is now going to be trying to figure out where I want to go, because there's too many places to go, especially because I want to be able to share it with you guys. So there's places I'd like to go that might remind me of some of the visual novels we've read together. For instance, I think the sanatorium / or the hotel in this, isn't it depicting a part of the more southern part of Japan? Kind of in the mountains near the sea, but in what's it called? I know prefecture names very vaguely.
Yeah, I think it might be in Kyushu, but I'm not sure. Amusingly enough, it's actually one of the parts that I have not really looked into, even though there are a lot of hints about where it might be. So it might be possible to actually find the real location where it's based.
There was someone. I can't remember the name right now. I'll have to look back, but someone would sometimes put comments in the videos where they had visited a lot of the places that were depicted, or at least very similar places that were being depicted in SeaBed. One of the coolest ones was actually there's a tiny little snippet where you follow. I believe it's a memory where I think it's Lily's memory after she lost her friend. Where she went up to the mountains and was hiking around where it was snowing, and somebody sent me pictures of that exact mountain and valley that she was talking about. And
yeah, that might have been me.
That was you?
I do believe so, yeah.
Oh yeah. See, it's somebody that makes sense. It was you. So no, it's so cool that we're able to make those connections. And so that's one of the things that makes me so excited. I think that's why I'm so inspired now to want to visit Japan. I mean, God, it makes you sound like such a weeb, but really so much of my life now revolves around Japanese media. Because I fell in love with visual novels, and then I started making videos about visual novels, and now I play visual novels 4 nights a week at least. Of course I'm gonna get obsessed with Japan. So I'm excited to go there someday and make that.
It's a great place to visit.
Oh, I can't wait. And I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make it happen somehow. But anyway, yeah, so I think the travel bugs. Anyone else who's a travel bug, this you're going to walk with Sachiko and Takako through their memories of their travels. I believe they go to, if I remember correctly, they go to Spain, Italy, San Francisco. I think
and
that's
the Southern
France.
Islands.
Huh?
And the Southern Islands.
Southern Islands. And it wasn't there a bit in France too? Well, they went to like, it wasn't Paris, like it was like southern France. I don't know, I can't remember.
No, I think the only European trip that's actually shown is in Rome, although they might have mentioned some.
Maybe. Some of these episodes have been so long ago, it can be hard to remember. But you know, like they really make the traveling sound really fun, and I liked how they got to like we got to explore a little bit of the locations they were in. Like they would talk about like the food they would eat and some of the like stories that they would like come across that involved certain areas. Like they visit Alcatraz, which I always thought was an interesting place to highlight. But it is one of the bigger tourist sites in San Fran, so it makes sense. It's just like it makes me want to travel more too, because like it tells the story about people who like make travel priority, and like just kind of like all it really takes honestly is dedication and being able to like work with your resources. It's not as big of a problem per se nowadays, but I still think a lot of us don't realize how much we can travel, especially if you ever want to have kids. Like, do it before. That will be something that stops you eventually, but they're getting older. So they get older, I'll be able to travel again. That'll be nice.
Yeah, by the way, I know that the writer of the game has been to San Francisco himself, so that's probably why it's so detailed.
Oh, it's fantastically detailed. Like I haven't actually been there, but I know people who've lived there, and like they talked about the exact same stuff. The scariest thing I think would actually be driving in San Francisco, because they talk about it in the story, but like going up roads that are like nearly 45-degree angles, like I can't imagine, because like if you're driving up the hills, like there's a point where like the hill will flatten out, but like it just looks like the road like vanishes and you're just like driving into the sky before you eventually like kind of come crashing down. Luckily, like luckily it's one of those places where you also like you don't have to drive if you go there. Like they have like, really good public transportation, and so which America does not do good at. Most honestly, we do not have public transportation down very well. But San Fran's one of the exceptions. But
yeah, it takes some guts to go to another country and drive a car there.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, even though the rules may be the same, all the traffic signs and stuff like that may be totally different, and there may be like different like customs in how you drive there.
Oh yeah, and then like police, like I hear in most countries outside the United States, if you get pulled over by a police officer, it's customary you get out of the car and like talk to them outside of your car. Do not do that in America. You might get shot, because like we have the culture that the officer feels safer if you stay still and don't move too much. And so like if you start climbing out of your car, their training is that you might be trying to draw a weapon on them, and they'll kick into gear. So yeah, if you're in the United States and you're traveling for whatever reason and you get pulled over, don't exit the vehicle unless they tell you to. Like FYI, traveling in the United States, like that's one of the biggest no-nos that I'm sure tourists could make. But once again, you're right. Just in general, driving is risky outside of your home country because of all the differences. So it's usually better to just not.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
It's not a huge deal, like unless they are really on edge and they're really worried. You probably would be okay, but they definitely shout at you if you climbed out of your car. So yeah, good thinking. And then so I guess we kind of lost the plot a tiny bit, but I really think we're about wrapped up. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to say that maybe we didn't cover about the game that you like, especially if there's somebody who's watching who hasn't yet fully read it? Like, what would you want to tell to somebody who is considering buying this game?
Well, while I'm trying to think of that, I actually have a random question for you that came to my mind while we were talking. Like, what do you think about the opening scene of the game? Like, I remember when you played it, you found it very like unnerving. It's a little weird. So, what do you think about it?
Well, if I recall correctly, it had a lot to do with like the very, very beginning. Like, wasn't there a sequence that was like in the dark that had like that was kind of disconnected? Now that I think about it, if there was a scene like that, it probably it was related to Narasaki. Oh, now I'm gonna have to watch it again because like now I'm like thinking like, man, are you talking about that, or are you talking about like the island where Sachiko and Takako
like the
explore?
very first opening of the game when you start the new game.
It's been so long, I can't remember.
Right.
I'm trying to think like. I might actually have to look it up real quick and see.
Yes, definitely take it out if you can't remember it. I think it's especially interesting when you have already played the game, but it's also very interesting on the first game because it has this very weird background music that sounds kind of broken and everything's a little weird, so it kind of sets the mood.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to give it a look. Because like I remember like the first impression of the game in general for me was very like it was a surreal feeling like the whole first part. Like just because, and then that's kind of like the whole feel of the game. It's like it has this kind of like it fades in between like this feeling of like grounded like super reality, like you said, slice of life, but like without even like any tropes. It's just like it feels like you're looking at someone's life. But then it has these weird phases where it'll suddenly like do something that seems so off and so crazy or random. Like, oh my gosh, like the tips. Like some of the first tips that you get. Well, actually all the tips really. But the first few tips I read, like I was reading it and I was like, there's something very weird going on. But I had no earthly idea what. But the feeling was very unsettling, like you were saying before. And so I'm guessing it was very similar to those, or maybe even directly related to them. It's like there's gonna like this game definitely has its moments where you're just like you'll read a section and it'll fade to like the next scene change or whatever, and you'll be like you'll just gotta throw your hands up in the air and you're like, what was that?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, about what I would say to somebody who's thinking about picking up the game. Well, I would warmly recommend it to anyone, but I know that not everybody will like it. And there's a pretty good rule of thumb that one of the reviewers actually pointed out, and I was like, okay, that sounds like it might actually be pretty accurate, and so far it has been so. Like, if you like two of these three things, which is Yuri, Slice of Life, and Mystery, if you like two of them, then you will like the game. But if you like one or less, then you probably won't like it.
That's a good
you don't need to like all of them.
Oh man, that's a good way of putting it. It's like it's so funny though, because like for me, I just like good stories in general. So like I don't care like what the stories are about. And I guess I would put out a cautionary thing about the Yuri. Like I think the pictures even on the slide are a little representing like the Yuri-esque of the story. Because, like I said, it's not blatant. As a matter of fact, you don't even have a whole lot of actual, like, Yuri content in the series. It's the characters, like the Yuri feeling, the lesbian feeling in the game. Like, it's there, but it's not. It really isn't the focus of the story. So, like, it's a good one too. I think if you aren't sure how you feel about it, because I feel like it makes the emotions very real and helps communicate like real emotion, and so when the moments do come up, they don't feel awkward or forced. And that's I think that's a good way for someone to approach it if you're a little on the fence about your feelings about that.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I think that's also one of the more unusual aspects of SeaBed in general. Actually, like it's one of very few like adult Yuri games, and by adult I don't mean 18 plus. I mean that the characters are actually adults, like they're around 30 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like almost all of them are like in a school setting or something like that.
Yeah, visual novels do tend to take like visual novels and anime both seem obsessed with high school, but this is one of those exceptions, and it's really I think it's good because it has a mature feel. Maybe that's a word I don't think I've used for this yet, but I think it's really good. The way it approaches problems, the way it approaches thought, the way it approaches like memories and memory loss, the way it approaches Yuri and relationships in general is very mature. You're not gonna get flashy cliches. You're gonna get hard facts and genuineness. Like it's so genuine. That's probably the the cusp of what makes it so good. Is it just feels so wholesome, and especially, oh my gosh, in the ending, oh man, I was a basket case for the whole the last 2 episodes or last 3 episodes. I don't think there's a single one where I spent like half my time like crying because it was just so powerful.
Yeah, the game moves so slowly, but when it starts to approach the end, it feels like the chapters are getting slightly shorter every time, and it feels like things are just moving faster and faster, even though like there still is like nothing happening. But I remember when I got to the end of the game myself for the first time, and toward the end of the game, I just couldn't put it down for another session, and I ended up finishing it in like the last 6 hours or something, one sitting, and finished at like 4 a.m. And then I was just like, oh, wow. And then I wasn't able to sleep because there was so much going on through my head.
Oh yeah, no, I don't blame you. That's one of the benefits of doing it on a channel like this, though. It kind of forces me to take the little bites and not like go crazy. And I personally appreciate it because I get to digest the story. But it still was one. It was like every time I ended an episode, I was just like, I don't know if I wanted to just start recording immediately again and keep going. So yeah, no, absolutely. Like I don't do number ratings or anything like that just because I think they're so arbitrary. But I absolutely approve of this one. One of the better ones that you can buy, just for the impact it'll have, I believe, on your life. And it's also one of those ones I think. Like there's replay value not only because like when you finally understand the mystery there's so much symbolism and meaning going on that you can go back and watch, but this is one I imagine like I could play this again in 5 years and have a completely different experience because it can be so relatable in so many different ways. So I would call it a dynamic story, one that like you almost need to experience over and over a couple times, but like distantly. Like I don't know if you'd want to just play this one through over again and again and again right away, but it's kind of it'll be a gift that keeps giving, and as your life changes, the things that it talks about I think will change and continue to influence and grant you kind of insight that you might have missed before.
Yeah, I agree, and it's like a phrase that I'm a little hesitant to use because when I say it, it may sound like the game is trying to force some use on you, which is not. But I think it's a game that will actually like make you a better person if you read it.
Yeah, you're right though. Like, I think it will, and I think it does it because it gives you perspectives of life that you might not experience on your own. It's not shoving anything down your throat. It's not trying to pound you with a message. It's not trying to like force feed you concepts or ideas. It really is just an experience, but a raw and powerful one. I would equate it to reading like a biography about a person who you respect, where like you detach from the things that you already knew about them, and you get to focus on things that like you never knew before, and help you better understand the person as an individual rather than just as like a potential celebrity. This game really strips back and tries to look at the raw essence of what people are. And it's really powerful in how it does it. But yeah, it's a slow burn. Like, it's like a candle. It's not a firework.
Yeah, certainly. And it's a long candle.
Very true, very true. Well, Jake, thank you so much for being here with me today. It was wonderful to be able to chat with you about the series and having the insights, especially from the perspective of effectively being a part of the development team for its publication in the West. It was wonderful having you here, so thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invite. I'm really happy to have gotten the chance to be here and talk about SeaBed. Like I've said, I can always ramble on about SeaBed.
Yeah. So thank you again, and thank you guys for those of you who joined us, or those of you who are in the future who are watching this in retro. I really hope you have a chance to play the game. I hope it has a big impact on you as it did for me. If it does, or if you have any comments or things you want to say, like leave comments on some of my videos. I usually check on my older videos for comments anyway, so don't be afraid to like continue to let me know what you think. Check it out. It's on Steam. Really easy to find. There's a link. I believe if it's not in the description of this broadcast, it's in the description of every episode of it on my show, on my channel. And I guess the next most important thing is keep an eye out. Next Friday, we'll be starting a new series. I haven't actually decided yet what it's going to be. I'm debating between two. The struggle for my channel as a visual novel channel is that each visual novel I start is a commitment for a while, because I really hate, like, I'm not the kind of person who can just stop a series after a little bit. Like, I did that initially at the beginning of my channel because I didn't really know what I wanted my YouTube channel to be about at first. But once I dedicated myself to visual novels because I absolutely love them to pieces, part of my resolution is that unless it's like genuinely terrible and I just like can't stand it, I'm gonna see it through to the end, because it's important. I can't stand it if people stop halfway through. It's like my biggest pet peeve. So if there's a visual novel you want me to read, put it, get onto a Discord. I have a whole chat box for recommendations, and I try and keep track of them. I've got a list. Just because I don't jump right onto something you requested doesn't mean it's not on my official list. That will happen eventually, but you gotta be patient. This is gonna take time. Maybe someday I'll be able to do more videos than 3 a week, but right now that's all I can manage. So yeah, check out our Discord. It's a really good place. A lot of good people there. There's a lot of zones I don't even get to see because I labeled them for spoilers, and so I refuse to see them. So if you just want to go and chat with other people about a series that's ongoing, it's a great place to go and just talk, gossip about like the terrible things I'm going to see in the future. And yeah, like, it's been real chill having you guys all here, and as always, you know, this channel is really fun. It's a good opportunity for me to express myself, but most importantly, it brings us together in sharing of something that I doubt many of us can talk to many other people, because visual novels are still kind of a niche, a growing niche. I'm excited for the future of visual novels, but for now, we're kind of like the founding fathers of the visual novel movement in the West. So, it's really fun to have you guys around for that. And thank you for your support. It means a lot to me. But yeah, so thanks for joining me. And until the next video you watch with me, or whatever to see me in next, I'll see you there.